Good evening, Bahamas. You're tuned into MB12, broadcasting from Cable 12 studios on Robinson Road. Coming up tonight in news, the government's profits from BTC have doubled under Cable and Wireless, according to its CEO. Prime Minister Perry Christie says campaign finance reform is needed, plus a retrial requested in the case of a convicted pedophile. We've got those stories and so much more coming up. I'm Paige McCartney, and MB12 starts right now. Welcome once again to NB12. It's been 15 months since Cable and Wireless took over the Bahamas telecommunications company. While the sale continues to be a contentious issue, BTC CEO Jeff Houston said the government is collecting millions more since the company took over. This even as he admits BTC's customers are still experiencing major disruptions in service. Our Jasmine Bonamy has more in this report.
Taking over BTC, CWC executives revealing this morning that they've doubled revenue at the formerly government-run entity. CWC signed agreements with the government in February 2011 to acquire a 51% stake in BTC. The price tag attached was $210 million. Since then, Houston says they have invested more than $100 million in the company. Most of that money was for upgrades to the outdated internet, cellular, and landline platforms. This morning, Houston told members of the Rotary Club of Nassau Sunrise that CWC is already seeing a return on its investments. According to Houston, last year, the profits hit the $20 million mark. He adds that the increased profits means even higher returns to the Bahamian government.
We came into a business which was actually on a glide path to reducing returns to government. And if we look at the dividend payments we've made to government, and both shareholders and the government in particular, even as a 49% shareholder in the business, the government is getting probably more than it was getting before as a 49% shareholder than it was as a full owner of the business. So we've been able to turn around the profitability of the business quite significantly. In 2010, BTC reported annual net earnings of $12.8 million. And since privatization, we've paid dividends to government of $8.8 million, with another $20 million coming this year.
But since coming to office, Prime Minister Perry Christie has repeatedly announced intentions to reacquire the majority stake in BTC. While senior executives have met with members of the Christie administration several times, Houston told reporters that they have not talked in recent days. But he expects that will change soon.
We haven't had any direct dialogue in the last few days, but we expect that dialogue will pick up over the coming weeks and months. I think it's just, and it will be something that both shareholders, I'm sure, will sit down and have a discussion about and come up with some collaborative way forward. We're very optimistic. My job is to make sure that we at BTC and all my colleagues keep very focused in doing the jobs we need to do to service our customers and to try and remove that distraction from the day-to-day running of the business.
In the meantime, he says BTC will continue to serve its customers as best they can. As for those major disruptions in service for cellular customers, Houston says they will persist for at least the next 2 months. Back in early June, BTC executives said they expected service would be back to normal by mid-July. But due to ongoing upgrades, they say the disruptions will continue with slight improvements expected each week.
On the drop calls, I think we'll be feeling an improvement now. We've actually almost completed the rollover to the new 2G network as well in New Providence, so that'll start to carry a lot more of the voice traffic. So we expect to see now going forward on a weekly basis continuing improvements there. But it's also important to put that in perspective. You will never totally eliminate drop calls on a mobile network. It's just a feature of the network. It happens occasionally. We obviously will try to eliminate that. Our target is that 99% of all calls will be successful. There'll always be at least 1% which aren't, but we're working hard to get there, and I expect by probably September we'll be there.
He adds that improvements to the 4G networks should begin next month. Reporting for NB12, I'm Jasmine Bonamy.
Well, Prime Minister Perry Christie today suggested that the current state of campaign financing in the Bahamas is at minimum improper and in some cases criminal. He was addressing members of Parliament and senators during a parliamentary conclave today at the British Colonial Hilton. Christie says political parties are living a lie by continuing to allow the current system of campaign spending to exist. His comments come one day after recommendations put forth by international election observers were tabled in the House of Assembly. Vonique Toot has more.
Though he has not committed to enacting legislation that would govern political spending, Prime Minister Perry Christie says the time has come for political parties to seriously discuss campaign finance reform. Among other things, the Organization of American States and CARICOM have recommended laws that would limit campaign spending and establish a mechanism to oversee money coming in and out of campaigns. Mr. Christie says over the past 10 to 15 years, these practices have become repugnant to best political practices in a democracy.
The worst thing we could do as parliamentarians is pretend that what we know to exist, which at the minimum is improper and irregular, and at worst criminal, what we know to exist, not what we imagine, not what anecdotally we think takes place, what we know.
Following the May 7th general election, the Free National Movement and Progressive Liberal Party accused each other of vote buying. The Prime Minister believes campaign finance reform would help to eliminate that.
You know, there are laws now that says that you shouldn't treat, meaning you shouldn't do things to induce people to vote for you in an election. And very clearly, you can just list countless examples where the law is breached, but almost like when I'm in power, I do it, and when you're in power, you do it.
The OAS and CARICOM also recommended legislation that would prohibit anonymous and foreign contributions. Christie says he is open to the idea of an independent commission, which would determine whether foreign investors are influencing a government's decisions.
And we have to disclose, we have to determine whether we are prepared to regulate that by way of disclosure, even if it's to an electoral commission and not to the public. But the fact of the matter is, we have to determine, given that we are a small country, and given that we know there are major investors who, in as open a way as they can, say, I'm going to give this to the FNM, I'm going to give this to the PLP.
Campaign finance reform has been discussed in political circles for years. When asked if his government is committed to making it happen during this term in office, Mr. Christie said the PLP, FNM, and DNA must all have the political will.
I'm hoping that it is understood that I'm committed to initiating discussions with the political parties, and yes, I would like to say that I'm going to be recommending to my colleagues a certain course of action with respect to the steps we should take. But I don't want to impose it on the Bahamas.
Mr. Christie says only time will tell whether political parties are prepared to raise the level of politics in this country by coming together to work towards campaign finance reform. Reporting for NB12, I'm Vonique Toot.
Well, Prime Minister Christie also defending his administration's decision to call a referendum that the Progressive Liberal Party vigorously opposed 10 years ago. The government plans to hold a referendum that would eliminate gender discrimination from the Constitution of the Bahamas. Bahamian women who marry foreign men cannot automatically pass their citizenship on to their children, but Bahamian men who marry foreign women can. The Ingram administration held a referendum on the issue back in 2002. However, more than 58,000 people voted no. Christie says the PLP encouraged voters to reject it because it was, at the time, not the will of the people.
No, I think the PLP's opposition to the referendum was that you should never do something against the will of the people. And the FNM was actually acting against the will of the people. The substance, as I said before, it was not a question of a judgment as to the substance of it, it was a judgment as to the process. And we attacked the process, and we were successful in attacking the process. Now, the byproduct of it is, you say that it wasn't passed. Yes, it wasn't passed. But we were never motivated against any issue on the referendum. We were motivated against the fact that it was being imposed upon people against their will.
However, FNM leader Dr. Hubert Minnis isn't buying it, noting that the government never mentioned a referendum on women's rights in its Charter for Governance or speech from the throne. Minnis questioned whether the PLP's change of heart had anything to do with former Prime Minister Hubert Ingram's recent comments. He told reporters last week that he viewed such a referendum as more of a priority than one on legalizing numbers houses.
They used it as a political tool at that particular time. They felt that they would have gained mileage in whatever they did to become government. I don't think it was right to walk on the backs of women just to achieve your own goal. A woman deserves better than that. I think they deserve the complete respect and in our society, and for what they've done and what they do today. When you consider 67% of our births are to single parent, and a lot of the homes are run and controlled by females.
Nevertheless, Dr. Minnis says he will vote yes whenever that referendum is held.